Building or leasehold improvements, I'm going to go into this a little bit more. Because another thing that can be kind of confusing for agencies is how to deal with additions or renovations or repairs or maintenance. But any additions or renovations or repairs you make to an existing building after the acquisition of the building, you would only capitalize them if they meet one of these criteria. So it adds square footage to the existing building, it prepares an existing building for a new use through the renovation, or extends the useful life of the existing building. Ordinary repairs and maintenance, such as replacing the roof or replacing the HVAC system, are not building improvements, even if they cost a lot of money. There are a lot of agencies capitalizing HVAC system replacements. Please do not do that. Now, this is different if you have a building that didn't have an HVAC system and you're putting it in for the first time. You would capitalize that. You're just replacing it. Please don't capitalize it. Extending the useful life of an existing building requires specific improvements in response to a change in the use or contents of the building. I'm just going to say that we say extends the useful life of the existing building. I wouldn't even try to consider whether this needs to be capitalized or not, unless it's a significant increase in the useful life. If you feel like it's going to add like a year or two, just expense it, do not capitalize it. I have a lot of agencies that there's been a lot of deferred maintenance that they've been doing recently because they weren't getting the funding they needed until recently. So yeah, the costs for it are very large, and it feels weird not to capitalize them. But in most of those cases, those things do not need to be capitalized. They need to be expensed. And this is based on our policy. You could work somewhere else and they treat this thing completely differently, but this is how our state handles it. If you do have something that meets the criteria for a building or leasehold improvement, you should capitalize it separately from the building or the lease asset. I'd also like to mention, I'm talking specifically about building or leasehold improvements, but some of this would apply to other things that aren't buildings. Repairs or maintenance on other things, just a regular repair typically needs to be expensed. If it's something really substantial, you may want to capitalize it. If you have a car and you replace the water pump, which, could still cost a good bit, that's not really extending the useful life of the car significantly. That's kind of a normal maintenance item. It's not as normal as, an oil change, but it's something you're going to have to do usually at X number of miles. On the other hand, if you have to replace your whole engine, that probably could be capitalized. Again, if you have anything like that, you're not sure, please call me.
Layla, we have a question in the chat. There's a question in the chat.
Yes, so on our website, there is a reporting policies and procedures manual. I'll show it to you at the end if you're still here. And you can download that. That's something we put up there every year. It doesn't usually change much year to year, but there is a lot about capital assets in there. I've tried to add a lot to the instructions, the reporting package too, but it doesn't have everything. So yeah, the repairs and maintenance stuff, it can be kind of a gray area. And I kind of err on the side of not capitalizing them most of the time because it's usually just not worth your time. And I think this is another thing that it's hard for someone to write you up one way or the other from an audit standpoint. But I think in most cases, it's really hard to meet one of these criteria. And I do want to share another example that I had last year with an agency. They had this awning they were building on the outside of their building, but it was attached to the building. It's a very, I guess, extended awning. It was almost like a walkway cover, not like a short awning you'd see over a door. And it cost about $550,000. Now they read the policy and there's interpreted as, let's expense this, it doesn't meet this criteria, which I can see how they would do that. But when you get to stuff that's on the exterior of the building, it gets kind of complicated, and I don't think this is really written in a way that addresses that as well. So after talking with them, we did make an adjustment at year end to capitalize it. And that was based on how much it cost. The fact that it was attached to the building, we did it as a building improvement. So it was attached to the building, and it added a new feature to the building and extended the exterior of the structure. So it's, kind of similar to adding square footage, but it's, not exactly the same. So if you ever have anything where you're doing stuff to the outside of a building, please call me because we probably should talk about that. It's really hard to write these policies and procedures where they address every situation because we have, especially in state government, all kinds of weird, unique assets. So I'm sorry, there's not always like a clear-cut answer. It just sometimes happens when we're talking about accounting stuff. Capitalization of software development cost. If you have costs incurred during the preliminary project stage, you expense those. I'm not an expert in software development, but that would be your conceptual formulation and evaluation of alternatives, determining the existence of needed technology, and selecting your alternatives. My understanding is you might get some demonstrations and stuff during this, and it probably can be pretty time consuming, but you do not capitalize any of that. Once you start the actual application development stage, then you start capitalizing the cost. And you do that until the software is operational. So that stage includes design of whatever you picked as your chosen path, the coding, the installation of hardware, and the testing and parallel processing. Once the software is operational, you should not be capitalizing any costs incurred after that. So if you have some maintenance or you're making minor modifications, just expense those. I have some agencies that are kind of building multiple types of software. I think they kind of see them as one piece of software, but they're more like 2 or 3 different pieces. That's something to consider. You probably should be doing those as separate assets, especially if they can go live and function independently of one another. Even if they have some kind of interaction with one another, they don't need each other to function. Treat them as a separate asset. And there's more details about this again in the manual that hopefully everyone knows what I'm talking about now on pages 45 through 46. I'd like to also mention that data conversion cost should be expensed unless the data conversion is necessary to make the software operational. And in that case, you would capitalize them. I don't think that's very common. So most of the time, you probably should just be expensing the data conversion cost. If you purchase or develop a single software program as one intangible asset, but you're buying, a certain number of licenses, you still need to consider that one intangible asset. It doesn't matter if you had to buy 200 licenses. If you capitalize it, and then later you go and you buy some more licenses, in that instance, you may need to capitalize them, but you would only do it if the total for the purchase of the additional seats is more than 100,000. Anyone with a CVITA, you probably have heard some of this recently because a lot of these rules are similar. So capitalized works of art and historical treasures. They can be individual items or collections of items, and they're deemed to be of educational, cultural, or historical value. You classify these as non-depreciable if the useful life can't be determined, because interest in the object is expected to continue to be of value to society as a whole for an indefinite period of time. This is probably something that affects the museum or the library a little bit more. If you have individual items, you capitalize them if the value exceeds 5,000, like I mentioned before. So individual items, they don't have any special exceptions once you're purchasing now and in the future. If you buy anything and you add it to a collection and the collection was acquired prior to June 30th, 1999, you should still treat that as an individual item. A collection should be evaluated as a whole for capitalization only if the individual cost of collection items can't be easily determined. And in that case, you'd use the $5,000 threshold for the whole collection. We have some works of art and historical treasures. They're not capitalized. We have this special rule that if it was not capitalized as of June 30th, 1999, you don't have to capitalize it as long as it meets these three criteria. And you have to meet all three of those criteria. I'm not going to read it all. You can read it. But we have a few agencies with us, and they have to provide us every year with documentation explaining why the collection is not capitalized. And I know that's annoying. We have to get it every year for auditing purposes. So that's why you have to give it. I'm sorry, but you should just be rolling it forward every year. I have re-recorded this section of the training because we had a typo in the original training. For assets purchased in groups, the state's policy generally is to apply the capitalization thresholds to individual items rather than to the groups. So if an agency purchased 15 desks or 100 laptops, the agency would examine the cost of each individual item to determine if it should be capitalized. Effective July 1st, 2023, so for FY24, the state had to modify this policy and add one exception in order to comply with GASB Implementation Guide number 2021-1, question 5.1. If any agency purchases a group of similar assets that individually are below the applicable capitalization threshold, but in the aggregate exceed $1 million, please contact me, Layla Ballard-Shawley, the Comptroller General's office. My contact information will be in a subsequent slide. We are handling these situations on a case-by-case basis. Please call me or email me as soon as you're aware of making any purchases like these. It's much easier for us to deal with it prior to the purchase or as you're processing the purchase than after the fact if we do need to handle it in a different manner. I'm not the biggest fan of this change made by GASB. I think it's kind of arbitrary whether you decide to purchase the 15 deaths together or separately. I think it could lead to a lot more inconsistency in how we're capitalizing things, but we have to go by what GASB tells us. So please, again, if you have anything like this, call me. If you aren't really sure if the assets are similar, please also reach out to me and we can figure out what you need to do. I am going to show you where this manual is that I keep talking about real quick. So you go to guidance and forms for state agencies. Can everyone see this? Linda, can you see this?
Yes, I can.
Okay. You go here and click on gap reporting and go to agencies that submit year-end reporting packages. This right here is the manual I'm talking about. And like I said, we update it every year. Don't feel like you need to read the whole thing every year because it's not meant to communicate significant changes to policy. If we have any of those, we'll let you know. It's meant to be more of a reference guide, but I think capital assets are an area that this manual can be very useful and referred to on a regular basis if you're dealing with capital assets a lot. This is also the page where you can get our reporting packages, which all of them have been updated, except for a few that won't be updated until after the fiscal year. And you click on the sample reporting packages link, take you here, and we have all examples for all our packages, and we also have tutorials. The recordings of these trainings are on here. We already have a few from last week. I uploaded the PowerPoint I did for last year and also upload these PowerPoints along with the training video. The fund classification recording I did last week got messed up, so I had to re-record the walkthrough of the package separately. So that's why you see that. So if you're watching it, please keep in mind you might want to watch both of them.